Where we ended in our previous video, a small remnant of humanity had survived the global flood. The part of that story that everyone remembers is 40 days and nights of rain. But that was just the start. The earth stayed flooded for 5 months, and then it took about 7 more before Noah, his family, and the animals could disembark, so to speak. God then makes 3 specific promises. So this is a new covenant, and the human end of the bargain is pretty simple. God says he will never flood the whole earth like that again. Apparently there had never been rainbows in the sky before the flood, so a rainbow is God's promise to us that it won't go that way again. In the Garden of Eden, only plants were for food. Now, after the flood, God says, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. It's a good thing God waited until after the animals were off the ark to let Noah know about this one. We have to assume the animals were given a good head start. Finally, humans are supposed to be fruitful and multiply, and there's a last part of that, which is to fill the earth. So that would mean to spread out and populate all the land that's available. With all of this in mind, there's no mention of Noah and his wife having any more kids. In fact, it seems the only thing Noah does after the flood is to grow grapes, make wine, drink the wine until he gets drunk and pass out. Sadly, something happens when Noah is blackout drunk. The Bible simply tells us that his son Ham saw his father's nakedness because why get drunk and keep your clothes on, right? When Noah does wake up and he knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan." Now, keep this bit of text in mind because we are coming back to it very shortly. Canaan, who is the son of Ham, and we see there's quite a few descendants of Ham, some for Japheth and also for Shem, so it seems that each of Noah's sons and their wives are doing their part to multiply and repopulate the human race on earth. I heard from someone else that there are 70 names listed, and that would be an interesting combination of 2 Bible numbers. However, I take several of the names, specifically in Ham's line, to be tribes, and that's based on their plurality, the letter S at the end. So I'm seeing 10 tribes that trace back to Ham. Then we have Shem and Japheth. Each could be considered a tribe of their own, at least in this telling of genealogy. So the 10 plus the 2 makes 12, which is yet another significant Bible number, particularly when it comes to tribes. But the 10 and 2 split also is interesting to me, because that's going to happen again much later. One person I'll highlight here is Ham's grandson, Nimrod. As best as we can understand, he was a key person behind the formation of the city of Babylon and the building of the Tower of Babel in this city. And that's where the narrative takes us next. In this city, people were building this tower, which may have been shaped more like a pyramid than a modern tower, and it may have been either an attempt by the people to exalt themselves or to be able to climb into heaven, or even to provide an easier pathway for God to descend to the city out of heaven. In any case, God did not appreciate what the people were doing. For one thing, they weren't spreading out to fill the earth. And even if they had the best of intentions, God's response showed his displeasure. Suddenly, the people were speaking entirely different languages from each other. The tower project was abandoned, and the people started to move to different places in groups based on their new languages. Now, exactly when and where this took place is hard to say, but the narrative moves back to a genealogy, very much like the one we saw in chapter 5. And it was here in this part of chapter 11 when I froze in my tracks, and I realized that perhaps everyone, and I do include myself in that group, may have gotten something wrong all this time. Because on the surface, this section tells us about the lineage that goes from Noah's son Shem to Abram 10 generations later. But visually, and as with other graphics, I've put this one to scale, we are seeing Shem outlive everyone after him except for his great-grandson. That is pretty wild, but again, it seems that at the same time the earth is being repopulated, every few generations or so, the lifespan is starting to get shorter. But what got me thinking was when it said Shem became a father at age 100, 2 years after the flood. Here's why. Back in Genesis 5, Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This was when Noah was 500. In other words, that was 100 years before the flood. In chapter 9, Ham is referred to as Noah's youngest son. Chapter 10 says that Shem is the older brother of Japheth, and now we're told that Shem became a dad 2 years after the flood, and he was 100 years old. That means he wasn't the oldest. So how do we figure out who was the oldest? Well, if Shem is older than Japheth, Japheth can't be oldest. And if Shem is 100 years old, a full 2 years after the flood, he couldn't be the oldest. And this only leaves Ham. But if Ham was the oldest, why does the Bible say that Noah knew what his youngest son had done to him? So I'm going to deduce from this that Ham maybe didn't do more than observe a situation, one that involved his son Canaan somehow. Ham advised Shem and Japheth that something was wrong, and so youngest son here could have well been Canaan, the one who Noah cursed anyway. And I think that this youngest grandson at the time, or maybe as a grandchild, youngest just meant like youngest generation living at that moment in time. In any case, this is how I can detangle this apparent contradiction.